top there. So.
All right. Let me share my video and let's get started. Welcome everyone. This is the first art area interim we've had in quite some time. Your chairs are myself, Ori Steele, and Andy Newton. We're both the art area directors. We have a brief agenda and we're going to run through our normal slides. All right. This is the note well. Hopefully many of you have read this document and the links. If you haven't, I advise you to make sure you're familiar with all of the references here, as there are certain responsibilities that you have regarding your contribution and participation, and you need to be aware of them before engaging. This is the note really well. This covers the code of conduct and your responsibilities for being respectful and engaging in discussion. We want to debate the technical topics, not individual people or personalities, and remember to assume positive intent and engage respectfully. And if you have any concerns, there are various channels available to you to resolve those concerns. You should be familiar with this document as well. All right. Well, the on-site tips are probably not going to be super relevant for this one, but we're obviously using Meet Echo, and I would like to stress that this is a recorded session, so audio and video that you share here will be recorded and made available. These are the resources for the upcoming IETF 123 in Madrid. Hopefully we'll see you all there. For now, we're going to move past these and get to our agenda. All right, we've got a very brief agenda here. We've already covered the welcome and the note well. Andy's taking notes behind the scenes and keeping an eye on the queue and using his chair powers. I'll be driving some of the agenda discussion and answering questions in the chat. Please use the queue to add yourself to the line if you want to have a discussion. And for each of the presenters, you'll have a chance to say whether you want to take that question now or defer it to the end. We've left some opportunity to do a brief agenda bash here, although we do have a pretty packed agenda. So at this time, I'll ask, are there any items that folks would like to discuss or propose a brief commentary or discussion around agenda bash, and chairs will consider it. Oh, thanks, Jim. So Jim says in chat that he's taking some notes in the Hedge doc, and other co-note takers are also welcome. So thanks for doing that. All right. All right. Yep, I can help, probably help get that link to you. Paste it through the chat. All right. With that being said, Andy, we see your notes. Oh no, that's me looking at my own notes. Sorry, I'm confusing myself.
John Clenson has said if there's time, we might have a brief discussion on the allocation of email tasks.
All right. Email tasks. Yeah, well, since we haven't heard any other agenda items, and this is our first interim in a while, let's have a quick discussion around that. Can we keep that to maybe 5 minutes or something short? And John, feel free to start anytime.
I recommend we get through the rest of the agenda first and then see if time allows.
All right, good advice.
But I can certainly do a 5-minute introduction or maybe a 3-minute introduction, but let's go with the agenda.
Let's save it for the end then. That's a wise suggestion there. It's good to have you here. All right. With that, I think we've covered our agenda bash, and we're going to move on to the next item, which is usage of GitHub in the art area. So we asked the list some time ago if there would be objections to the art ADs experimenting with GitHub. And there's some background here in terms of why we as art ADs wanted to do this. We're often working in GitHub, as part of our other day job activities. We wanted a place to have a kind of issue tracker and collaboration around some sort of the private activity, that we as area directors are responsible for, particularly like management items or other administrative processes that we would typically handle in email. We now have a kind of visual way to keep track of them and organize them and make sure that they're getting processed appropriately. Of course, we're still using email a lot. We've asked the Secretariat to set up IETF art area on GitHub, and they've done so. We're planning to run it just like a regular working group GitHub would be run. We've already been experimenting with adding some of the sort of balloting templates and processes that we use for our ISG review and telechat preparations. So that you'll see there's some activity in there already. We have some ideas about adding other hints and useful documents for future ADs. So some process diagrams, some guidance, maybe some scripts to help work with the data tracker and mailing lists in Errata. I mentioned that we're using the Kanban board part of it already. And the other part that we think is valuable here is that this gives the art area a kind of footprint within GitHub, and it's a great opportunity for us to sort of direct the right conversations to the mailing list. So one comment I wanted to make here is that this is experimental, and of course all of our IETF processes are governed by discussions that are happening on the mailing lists and our regular process. The data tracker and the mailing list are the source of truth, and GitHub is just used by us in these cases, just like it would be for any other working group. See, John, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
I think if you can keep that balance, it's fine. But I would just caution about one thing. GitHub, in my experience, and it may be just that I'm getting old and senile, but GitHub, in my experience, has been very good for carrying on a very active conversation with very active participants, and depending on how it's used, fairly good for tracking history. Other ways of using it make it terrible for tracking history. But for somebody who is trying to follow the group, but with limited time and participating intermittently, looking at every 3 days if there are postings every hour and a half, and push things every hour and a half, which are changing things, it becomes impossible to follow and discourages participation. So again, I think if you've got the right balance here and can keep it, it's fine, but you should keep those constraints and those issues and potential problems in mind.
Awesome. Thank you.
The one advantage of email is it is really asynchronous.
I agree. We haven't done any kind of email integrations here yet, but you may have seen that for some other working groups. I would be cautious to do those kinds of integrations because they generate a lot of traffic on the mailing lists. But that's certainly something we can consider if a lot of folks want to see it.
My guess from other groups is that if you do this and there's a lot of activity in GitHub, then it discourages participation both in GitHub and on the mailing list. But again, if you're watching it and monitoring it, I think that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Any other comments on the usage of GitHub? And you're welcome. We did set this up ahead of time, so the meeting, the GitHub link exists. We can post it in chat. You'll see there's already some public activity there. And as I mentioned, we're also using some of the private features of GitHub to be able to maintain our checklists, our to-do lists internally. And we can make those available to the next round of ADs so that there's some history of how we process things that'll be available to them that they wouldn't have if all we were doing was handling that in our mailing lists or our email clients. I see there's a good discussion in the chat. If anyone wants to bring any of the chat discussion to the mic, you're welcome to do so. All right, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention you mentioned the email integration. So in RPP working group right now, we have a setup where there's a GitHub user which is kind of bound to the mailing list, and that it's mentioned in the issue. The conversation is then also tracked on the mailing list and in GitHub. And when finding the right balance, bringing the right issues into this conversation so far gave us kind of good experience.
So it's been positively received for RPP?
Yeah, because working on Enchanter, we had like catch all, and everything was pushed to the mailing list. It was a lot of complaints that it was too noisy, but right now, if we are doing it very selectively, it's kind of feels like a right balance. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Karsten.
So what my very simple question is, so the flavor of this repository is it's by the ADs for the people who work in this area, or is it more like by the people who work in this area for the ADs?
So yeah, it's a great question. So the RFC that establishes the guidance for working groups is sort of its guidance for working groups that want to use GitHub, right? As area directors, we have a bunch of responsibilities for the entire area and a lot of sort of tasks and processes that we need to either have templates for or refine. And so there are some items in here that are basically just for us as management items for the area that we want to, this is how we kind of want to coordinate. There are other ones that I think are really important for us to gather community feedback around. And I would draw your attention to the first bullet point, area description and job descriptions for the NOMCOM. Having recently served on the NOMCOM, I know how important these job descriptions and AD descriptions, job descriptions and area descriptions are. And we revise them kind of regularly. I would love to get more feedback on them from the community. I'd like to version control them to some degree so we can see how the area descriptions are changing over time as new areas form and that kind of thing. They're maintained on the wiki, and every NOMCOM they'll be uploaded as part of that process. But at some point, the IESG liaison to the NOMCOM will be asked to provide the revised job descriptions. And at that point in time, it'll be a great opportunity to take some community feedback on whether these job descriptions need some improvement. And I'd be happy to sort of coordinate any updates to them that the community feels is important around that. Obviously, it's ultimately still the responsibility of the ADs to deliver that. Does that answer your question? It's a little bit.
Yes, so my mental model can simply derive from that for a working group where there are chairs who are setting the agenda and people who are participating in the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. That's we hope anyway. We're experimenting here, so we're kind of building as we're flying it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robert.
So following on to Karsten's question, answer to Karsten's question, it's just like the group as itself, the ARTAREA group, is there both to help coordinate activities in the area, have cross-group area conversations, and collect information that is useful to the chairs and the ADs in the area. So I think the scope of what this repository would be capturing would be the same kinds of things that we would talk about administratively or laying down artifacts for in the ARTAREA group. It seems like a natural fit to me.
Awesome. Thank you. And just the last comment here, since we've locked the queue and we have to move on, but there's no expectation that future ADs will be obligated to do anything here. This is a process experiment that we're running for our term, and if it's valuable, they're welcome to continue it. But this isn't, a change that's going to be mandatory moving forward for anyone. All right. So that's it for this agenda item, and thank you for all the comments and discussion around it. And I think at this point, Andy, if we can.
Yeah, it's saying I can't change the chair slides, Can you do you have to relinquish control?
I can
take back slide control. There we go. Yeah. So now. Let me find it. All right, Pablo, you want control?
If it works, yeah. Otherwise, I would ask you just to change. Oh yeah, I have control. Yeah.
There you go.
All right. I am Paweł Kowalik from DNIC, but more in my private capacity here, talking about Domain Connect. What it is in short, maybe you heard about it already in other sessions during IETF 120, I guess, but just in case you don't, quick update or quick overview. This application level protocol to set up the zone records, let's say, in an easy integrated way with a good user interface for the users who are not that profound in DNS setup. It's mainly the integration between the third-party application providers who want to set up the records and the DNS providers who are hosting the zone. It's template-based with either static configuration or some dynamic placements of variables in the configuration. And in the end, it offers operational gains for both service providers and DNS providers in this sense. How it works in short, so basically the user would typically work with the service provider in their user interface and would want to set up the configuration for their domain name. So entering this domain name, the service provider would be able to look up who the DNS provider is with the looking up the _ domain connect record. This record would then give the further discovery about where are the endpoints of the DNS provider, and the service provider would be able also to discover if its template is supported by these DNS providers, and if all of this is given, the user can be presented with a prompt to proceed with the setup, and a flow, which is from the user interface perspective very similar to OAuth flow, would be given, where the user would authenticate with a DNS provider, authorize the change, and the DNS provider would then apply the setup either in a synchronous way, just in the flow. There's also a variant of asynchronous where actually OAuth will be employed, and the service provider would get appropriate tokens to make the change anytime later. Again, what are the features of the protocol? So as mentioned, there are templates which define the contract between the two providers. These two flows, one is one of asynchronous flow or the potentially recurrent asynchronous flow. There is also conflict resolution on record level. So basically the service provider can be assured that the setup is complete and is also not conflicting with any setup already present in the zone, like already configured A records, which would be conflicting with his own A records or similar items. There is also a feature of merging of SPF TXT records. So basically, if there are setups coming from different providers, the DNS provider could have a nice or have a clear overview which elements are coming from which provider, and can render the final record for them. There are also some other less important issue, but in some setups there are, like ephemeral records, like ownership verification, which is like a one-off, not permanent. And from the security standpoint, there is also the URL protection with signatures. So basically, the URL forging is here not that much possible if the provider would want, or malicious actor would want to impersonate any of the providers to set up something different. This prevented by that measures. This protocol is not that new, but and actually it has history back to in 2016 when it was first proposed. Since then, it's got quite a bit of adoption. So on the DNS side, like 20 providers, including some notable names, are integrating it, and this list is likely not even complete. The last time this list was compiled was in middle 2024, and back then it was covering like 35% of the .com zone. On the service side, it was back then like 300 templates. This list is continuously growing, and over 120 providers, including some of the providers that I mentioned here, which have a kind of good market presence. So from this integration, let's say one can say that the basic protocol specification is quite stable now, but the standardization would help to make the more providers convinced to adopt the standard. Yeah, so I mentioned already a bit of history, and I think history is relevant for the discussion today. So it was first presented 2016, and actually it didn't have any traction at IETF back then. When the next update started, it was already 2024, and afterwards there was a positive feedback in regex working group. It was also mentioned in DNSOP or working group, but none of the groups wanted to say, yeah, it's clearly in our charter, let's adopt it. It was rather difficult fit for any of the working groups, and Ori offered the AD sponsorship for this draft, which you likely have seen on the mailing list. There was some good feedbacks coming in there, but there were also questions raised whether AD sponsorship is the right way to go for this draft. There were some notable notions of people saying that like the draft still needs some amount of work to polish it to become a polished protocol, but generally mostly positive about the protocol itself, but that the document itself is not yet ready, and AD sponsorship wouldn't be the most effective way to address it. So this where in January the AD sponsorship was ended, and a new mailing list created, and the request from Ori to create a simple charter for working groups. And since then, there are also some say factual or requests to change some or to address some issues in the draft itself. Also, HTTP directorate has done a preliminary review, and let's say most of these issues were addressed in the 01 version, and also the charter was proposed over the mailing list. So this were more or less we are. So the charter proposal I just summarized it here, the main points. So basically taking the draft as a starting point, the scope very limited, like for one-off task of to precise the specification, to address any ambiguities or inconsistencies, and make it stable and suitable for standard tracks RFC, with only one deliverable of actually the standard track document or documents. If the working group would say it's better to split some things in two documents, this charter should leave this possibility open, and the milestones are basically aligned with this. And one point which is kind of open in the discussion about the charter itself, about the text, was the charter uses the reference to 70-21, and actually it was using the second bullet point here, so that it was sorry, the first bullet point here, that this should be considered as the technology where the protecting installed base is essential, and the feedback was that maybe this charter shouldn't be that strict on this point, and use the other reference, which would say that it's only best served by trying to protect its install base, but some tolerance for changes should be allowed. Yeah, so I would be happy to take the opinions from the mic at the end of my presentation, but it's just the last slide, which is actually asking not only about feedback to this point, but basically also to have some discussion about the creation of the working group itself, and the possible next steps.
Awesome, thank you. So at this time, we'd like to open the mic queue. Does anyone have comments on DCON? Do you have comments on the charter? Anyone read the charter? I'd love to hear from you. All right, I'm not seeing anyone reaching for the mic line raise hand button, so I'll just sort of give one extra comment here. I think the next steps are to continue to refine the charter and get agreement around the charter on the mailing list. I think we're probably close on that point. And so if that's the case, then the next step is to upload that charter to the data tracker and run our normal chartering process. So that my intention is to do that based on the conversations that I've seen on the DCON mailing list. But I'd really love to hear from the rest of the art area. Folks, if you're interested, you can send your comments to that the DCON mailing list itself. And if you are uncomfortable sharing your comments directly on the mailing list, you can always email me or the ART ADs directly. And thanks for this presentation, Paul.
Yeah. Good. So the thanks for this opportunity. As I said, on the charter, from the discussions, all the items have been resolved up to the this one item, which was brought up by Peter, with also the ask for a mailing list to speak up for more opinions. So far, there were none. So if this stays like this, I would say we should proceed with the original text as it was proposed. But
Right.
yeah. But anyway, I think that the ball is in your court. Yeah.
Yep, Jim, go ahead. We've only got a few minutes left.
Sure. Thanks. Just asking whether this is something that seems the approach here seems somewhat similar to what dispatch would do. Would we get more visibility for this activity? I wasn't really aware of it at all. Wondering if we'd get more visibility for this activity if it came to dispatch and people were able to kind of weigh in about, for example, the AD versus working group approach here.
That's a great point. Paul, this has been around since 2016. Did it already go through dispatch once? I thought that it had.
So I don't know what exactly was the course of action in 2016, because I joined this let's say project a bit later, but I remember it was kind of difficult to put it on the agenda, and actually the only regex was happy to have this topic covered. But when IETF 120, it was not at the dispatch, for sure not.
So that's a great point. I mean, I think it's fair to say, maybe see if there's time in dispatch. Since we already have a charter, it sort of already has a very clear intended direction, but it would definitely get a lot of visibility. And if there's agenda time with dispatch, I would invite you to reach out to the dispatch chairs for IETF 123 to raise some visibility for it.
All right, very good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. We thank you for this presentation. It's time for our next agenda item.
All right, Clemens, do you want slide control?
Can I share my screen?
I
I can present from these slides, but I
think so.
Okay. Let's see.
Is it asked to share a screen? Yes. I don't know why I'm not getting that.
Well, then I'm just going to present from the slides that you gave me.
Yeah, I seem to be having trouble getting that permission set for you. All right.
Great. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm from. So let's see. Can I go and click this? I can't click this yet. No, I can click it. I think. Yes. Okay. My name is Clemens. I work for Microsoft, and I'm bringing you lots of material to read. JSON structure, JSON-structure.org is where the project is hosted right now. Since I haven't been speaking to any of you, or maybe just a few of you, let me just first introduce myself, who I am and who we are. My team owns all the messaging services inside of in the Azure cloud and also in Microsoft Fabric. We're very standards oriented. We have been key drivers in Oasis for AMQP. We've been participating in MQTT. We've been driving cloud events in CNCF, the X registry metadata store project in CNCF. So we've been around Oasis and CNCF land a lot. Not here in the IETF, my team, but certainly my colleagues, Daryl Miller, who's also on the call in the HTTP API area, where I've also been presenting. One of the things we're doing in messaging these days is we're trying to make messaging more type safe, and we're trying to make data quality better, which means we need to have schemas for compact encodings, but we also need to have schemas for to basically describe what the data is for. Because ultimately, what we want to be able to do is generate code for producers and consumers, very similar to what you do with OpenAPI. And what we also want to do is we want to go and flow event streams into databases, and we want to flow event streams towards agents that are being driven by LLMs. And for that, we need to have really solid metadata. We need to have good descriptions for that data. So we started trying to do this with JSON schema for a while, and then ended up in very many different dead ends due to the complexity. One of the things we found out is that we can't take a JSON schema just from an external user and code generate on it, because it's very easy in very short space to go and create something that cannot be mapped to a programming construct because the constraints are not there. We also found that the tooling for instance, OpenAPI, but also just code generators from schemas, generally gives up at some point of complexity, and the point where those tools give up is very different depending on which tool you pick. And even in the OpenAPI tool generation, there's a project that has kind of generators on them. Like every language has a very different handling of how they deal with all of it, any of, and all of these composition constructs. Ultimately, because it's a data validation language and not a language that is really there for data definition. So what we decided in the interim, so first for what we do on the product development side right now, we found that we found that we could not use JSON schema as our kind of canonical schema language to get a tool on. So we've moved to Apache Avro schema for that. We're unhappy with that because it's not what most people know. So imposing Avro schema on people is not the shape, is not the right idea either. So JSON structure is effectively a new look at JSON schema, at the general structure of it, and what people know as a schema for JSON, and but put a different set of constraints in it and recomposing the whole model. It's not JSON schema. JSON schema aims at validation of JSON documents. This is here basically taking the exact opposite approach. You start with a set of data structures that you have in a program, and the goal is that you want to go and take those data structures in a program and communicate them to someone else who then also has a program that needs to go and work with those data structures. So it's not the document is not first, but it's basically the definitions are first. We have that problem in messaging. We have that problem in OpenAPI, that you are defining a data structure and then you want to go and communicate that data structure in a heterogeneous system. So that is what JSON structure is. And I brought a few slides to kind of illustrate that with some pictures. So it looks for someone who's coming to this new, and for developers who are building applications, when you tell them about JSON schema, this is something that they will recognize, right? The normal developer on the street effectively has this kind of level of understanding of JSON schema. They will know that you can go nest properties, they will know that you can go and define some arrays with it. But this is what a schema for JSON should look like. So you have a type, and then here I'm making some further new constraints. Type is now required, that every type must be named. And there are more primitive data types. Every type must be named is essential for being able to generate code from it. The type is now required, and that you can go and distinguish what is a type and what is a namespace is also important. So it's effectively a set. It looks like JSON schema, but it has a bunch more constraints that are making it friendlier for code generation and reversely from generating JSON structure from code. The extended primitive type set is effectively aligned with what users are having in their programming languages, and they're being made native. So there's a concept of an int64. There's a concept of an int8. There's a concept of an int28, and with those come serialization rules, because the type underlying, and they're being basically projected onto the underlying type system of JSON. So a datetime is projected into a string RFC 3339. The JSON pointer is mapped to the respective, is basically constrained by the respective RFC. The long numbers and decimals are mapped to strings because there's weaknesses in the JSON number model. So it's effectively taking the primitive type system, a extended primitive type system, and representing that into JSON, but taking those as native types. Because if we create it in a schema system, we can go and build an abstraction effectively underneath it. And it's not only there, this is a schema model which is expressed in JSON in the first place, and it can go and describe data types in other languages. It can also go and describe, obviously, structures in JSON. That's the most immediate mapping, but it can basically describe structures for other languages. And this is a change that I made. This is why I wanted to go and make this was what I fixed. This is no longer called $defs. This is actually called definitions. And as I said with the asterisk at the bottom, the reason why I'm picked definitions again is because I did a survey of schemastore.org and some other sources on where what the most popular way is of expressing schemas, and people are draft 07 is super sticky. Most tools are actually, or very many tools are stuck with that. They use definitions. So I also I borrow kind of the most popular term, and I've been using definitions for this. What this slide is about is reusable types. $ref is no longer a reference just to an arbitrary node in the document or an arbitrary schema in the document, but it actually must refer to a predefined types. And there's a reusable type section that is definitions. And if you want to go and make a reference, you have to go and refer to that. This $ref schema object is a object that needs to stand on its own, and that can be assigned to type. $ref is no longer able to reference external documents in this model. You must first import an external document, and then you can go and reference it. I have a slide on that in a moment. There's an explicit notion of namespaces now. A schema object, or non-schema actually, as I call it, that doesn't have a type definition, that can be a namespace container. So, and that's an explicit model now. So you have in definitions, network, and then inside of that is address, and then you can go and refer to that by type. That is very important to have that as a network model, to have that as an explicit model with namespaces, because that is something that then easily maps into programming languages that have namespaces, and obviously also into other schema models like Proto and like Avro, which also have namespace concept. The import model is an extension, and it works like this. You basically go and import an external file. That external file, because it basically becomes imported, becomes inserted into the target document, and then you can go and refer to it like local type. So import is one act, and then $ref is another act. But that makes all the imports, all the cross references more controlled, right? You only have one place where you can go and return to an external type, and then all of the resolutions of $refs are effectively local on the resulting composed document.
Clemens, I just wanted to make you aware you've got less than 5 minutes left.
Yes,
so.
I know. I'm quick. Abstract extends. There's a basic model of doing type reuse that's kind of like interfaces and objects. To have a formal model of type reuse. There's a model to do add-ins where you can go and this is kind of how the whole extensibility model works for JSON structure, where you can go and define effectively meta schema, and then you can go and effectively add with that with this or meta schema or schema, you can go and add plugin properties into existing types. And then important, and that's another companion spec, there's internationalization. So there's the concept of alternate names. We have, you can go and provide labels. You can provide alternate names for serialization for JSON, for instance, that exchanges the name. It's going to be serialized as first underscore name in this case. And so you can go and provide that. And then there's another companion spec for scientific units and currencies. We can currency symbols. You can go and define your own symbols, and there's a whole catalog of references to scientific units. And then the validation constraints that you're all familiar with from JSON schema are also put into a separate spec that is the validation spec, and conditional composition, all of any of not if then else are also still existing in another companion spec that is then reintroducing those. So in general, what I'm bringing, and this is what I would like to, so if we go to jasonstructure.org, is that I brought a set of 6 specifications. do I have that list somewhere in that deck? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't. Okay. So I brought a set of 6 specifications, and there's a core spec that defines kind of the core set of data types, and that's basically the key interoperable set. And then everything else is kind of annotations or extra validation features that you can go and turn on. Import is something that's not built into core, but you have to go and add it. And then once you have opted into import, then you can go and import other documents and go and compose. So JSONstructure.org, I'm very open to feedback and making changes. I put this out there. Our motivation is that we need to have we need to have in relatively short order a stable foundation to build other standards on. So we need to have ideally an RFC that allows us to go and define data structures, and that allows us to find data structures in a way that is helping with interoperability. And we need this for HTTP APIs. We need to have this for messaging scenarios, for eventing scenarios. We need to have this for cloud events. We're talking to industrial standards organizations, and it's all kind of, lots of the discussions are kind of stranding in, like, around standards, are stranding on, oh my God, what are we going to use as schemas? And so that's our proposal for trying to approach those schema models, is to have a refactoring effectively of the JSON schema shape, and really turning it into turning the refactoring into a data definition language rather than a validation language. Thank you.
All right, so we're a bit over time, but this is an excellent presentation. I'm glad I got a chance to watch this. I missed the last one at the last IETF. We'd like to open the floor for like 1 or 2 questions. I want to make sure we give some time, but we can't have much discussion here. Austin, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I'm Austin Wright. I do JSON schema and a few other things. Yeah, I really like what this is bringing. In the team, we've sort of probed like AWS and people, and they seem to be sort of indifferent about JSON schema. They just use it sort of because that's what the customers demand. I really like some of the new things that this is bringing. I'd like to see if we can bring some of those features, like especially localization things, into JSON schema. That's also a document I've been sort of trying to rework and see if we can bring to HTTP APIs eventually, once it's in sort of a stable place to be forward compatible, because there's some issues with that right now. But I think I am seeing some things here which might be suitable for a different document. It seems maybe you're going in a direction closer to ASN1 or protobuf or things like that, maybe.
So I think certainly the approach comes from very pragmatically, trying to make programs interoperate, and comes from data structures in apps and data structures in databases, and not from a document perspective. And I'm also not having the aspiration here to kind of build a bunch of nuclei for definitions that you can then go and recompose and then turn into something like JSON structure, but really kind of start very pragmatically with a spec that says this is how you define these things, that also can be read by a normal developer, and they can go and they can understand this straight away. And this is kind of what I've been proving to myself already. You also need to be able to go and give that spec to an LLM, and the LLM needs to understand it. And that's something, that's why I have 6 specs, which are also super detailed, because I feed them into an LLM, and the LLM now then knows what that language is looking like and what the constraints are looking like, right? So the goal here is really data definition more than document validation. And I think there's a lot of combinations you can go and create in JSON schema for document validation that you probably can't as easily do in JSON structure because of the extra constraints that I put in. But also JSON schema is so loose that it's causing all kinds of havoc if you give it into the hands of people who don't know what to do with it.
Right. Thank you. Any other comments, Austin? We got Pete in the queue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we can take to the list here.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank
yes,
you.
please take the remaining discussion to the list. Pete, go ahead.
So I'm mostly curious why this is an IETF thing and not like an ECMA thing. I understand that like HTTPI might want to use this in the API bits, but it sounds more like a languages thing. Why do we get the honor of publishing these specs?
So Darryl Miller, who's in the HTTP API area, and he's our person to engage in Open API. He and I talked, and he said, "Well, you should bring this to the IETF." That's mostly why I'm here. And I think it's
that's always fair. So, we'll make Darryl get up to the mic and answer.
Some other time perhaps, but thank you, Clemens. Thanks for this comments, and of course, Darryl, you can defend yourself on the list. Hopefully, we'll see a good conversation there. Awesome, and thank you for this presentation again.
You're welcome.
All right, Deborah, I think you're up. You want slide control?
If you can give it to me, would I then just click?
Yes.
Okay, I see. All right, great. Yeah, I can do it. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Petta from Drummond Group. AS2 is a critical protocol for B2B data exchange across a wide variety of industries. And it enables secure B2B data exchange and direct partner communication. So, however, the foundational specification, which is RFC 4130, was published over 20 years ago. It no longer reflects today's security best practices or how AS2 is actually being implemented in production environments. So the purpose of today's presentation is to highlight where the standard falls short, what updates we believe are needed to align it with modern requirements, and why this work is both timely and important for the AS2 community. Let me see if I can click right here. So here's a quick overview of the topics I'll be covering today. I'll start by giving you a sense of who we are and why our work in this space matters. From there, we'll highlight what's currently missing from the existing standards, specifically RFC 4130, and how security expectations have evolved over time. Then we'll take a closer look at areas where the implementation have drifted from the original specification, what parts of the standard need updating to reflect current best practices, and most importantly, why now is the right time to act. We'll then wrap up with the next steps and how you can get involved or stay informed. We go to the next slide. So who are we? Drummond Group was founded in 1999 and has provided interoperability testing and certification services for AS2 for over 2 decades. We bring vendors together twice a year in a full matrix, vendor-neutral environment to test their products against one another. This process allows vendors to identify and fix interoperability issues before their software reaches customers improving the overall quality and reliability of AS2 implementations. AS2 enables secure and reliable data exchange over the internet using SMIME with HTTP or HTTPS. Our founder, Rick Drummond, was one of the original authors of RFC 4130, the specification that defines AS2. I began working with AS2 in 2001 when I developed an AS2 implementation for a company that participates in Drummond's interoperability testing program. Through that experience, I gained deep hands-on knowledge of AS2 and a strong understanding of the challenges vendors face when building and maintaining interoperable implementations. I later joined Drummond in 2021 and now lead the AS2 interoperability and certification program. AS2 remains widely deployed today thanks to a combination of strong industry adoption, its suitability for B2B communication, and ongoing support from the community. Drummond's consistent, rigorous interoperability testing has played a supporting role by helping vendors align their implementations and maintain compatibility as technology and security standards have evolved. So why do we want to update RFC 4130 now, and why does this matter to us? AS2 remains essential in industries like healthcare, retail, finance, with tens of thousands of deployments worldwide. But the way these industries approach security and compliance has changed significantly. Stronger encryption algorithms and hashing standards, FIPS mode requirements, and automation expectations are now common. We need to modernize the RFC so that AS2 continues to be a viable, trusted option. Next slide. So what's missing? There's several gaps. First, RFC 4130 references outdated signing, encryption, and hashing algorithms, and it doesn't include the modern ones like SHA-2 or AES. Secondly, many widely used features like multi-part attachments and file name preservation aren't documented anywhere in the specification. Lastly, there's no guidance for automating certificate exchange, which is increasingly expected by IT and security teams. We see that security policies across industries have shifted. Organizations are retiring the SHA-1 and triple DES algorithms and are enforcing HTTPS only connections. Some require authentication headers or FIPS compliance. RFC 4130 doesn't account for any of this, which leads to fragmentation in how AS2 is deployed. We need to reflect today's expectations while maintaining backward compatibility. So without an updated standard, vendors are building their own workarounds and custom features. This creates a growing gap between what's in the RFC and what is actually being deployed. That gap increases interoperability challenges and support costs. Standardizing what's already being used will improve consistency across implementations. So what needs updating? A revised RFC should include stronger encryption and signature algorithms, define and reference optional profiles that are already in common use, enable secure automation like certificate exchange, and clarify what's considered a best practice versus what's a requirement. These updates will help the entire community align on a common modern foundation. So why now? Security risks are increasing and compliance rules are tightening, and we're seeing more variance in AS2 implementations. If we don't update the standard now, there's a risk that AS2 will lose industry trust or be replaced by newer protocols that may not be as mature or reliable. We have an opportunity to get ahead of that now. So, as next steps, we are looking to build momentum around updating RFC 4130, as well as integrating community consensus, test-derived best practices updating to the modern cryptographic defaults, and clarifying ambiguous behavior and optional features. We will aim to maintain backward compatibility so existing deployments can adapt with minimal disruption. We do welcome feedback, reviewers, and collaborators to help refresh the standard and keep AS2 relevant for the next 20 years. Thank you for your time. This is my contact information and a link to the current draft. I'm happy to take questions now or connect with you offline to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. So there's been some discussion of this already on the lists, and as you mentioned, there's an intention to present this at dispatch. So hopefully you'll get some feedback before dispatch that'll help prepare for that presentation as well.
I know that there was questions about, or maybe comments about opening the working group again, the EDINT work group. Was that something that we would like to do?
Thanks for raising that point. Yeah, so there is a concluded working group that historically has housed this information, and that is definitely an interesting question for the dispatch group to also consider as they look at the work. So welcome comments and thoughts about that on the art list, and also with the dispatch chairs. You've got Jim here as well. He's going to work with you to help make sure that we get a clear decision in the next steps.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're at time. Andy, how do you want to handle our remaining item?
Let's, if we can cover it in like 5 minutes. So, John, do you want to talk about the email core? I guess you said status.
Yeah, and I will try to be very brief. We've got a protocol floating around called email, which we use a lot, but which has basically not been updated or changed in any fundamental protocol sense since the beginning of the century. We've got a working group called Email Core, which is supposed to be revising the base documents. It's finished with one of them. The second one has gotten stalled due to constipation caused by IANA and the security area. You can pick better language if you like, but I'm trying to hurry. And we've got a second group called MailMaint, which was created for dealing with small pieces of work and small details, at least from my perspective. There's now discussion floating around, and I'm sorry that none of the 4 chairs are here to defend themselves, about trying to move pieces of what we thought 2 years ago was email core work into MailMaint or somewhere else, or AD-sponsored documents. And in the interest of time, I don't want to say much more. And again, because the chairs aren't here to defend themselves, I don't want to say very much more about that, except that number 1, we have a problem, and number 2, the area should be generally aware of it as well as the ADs being aware of it.
Yeah. So let me talk about this. I have privately talked to all 4 chairs, and they see no issue with us moving this work to MailMaint. I think the next steps are for me to try to get my hands around the scope of the problem, especially around the 5321 bis document. And I noticed that we have a response from IANA this morning. So I haven't gone through that, but I saw that. So I think that's my next steps. But if we want to move the work items from email core to MailMaint, I think it's on me to send email to both of those mailing lists, making sure the working groups are okay with that, and then we can go from there. So yeah, I think that's the current status.
Yeah, and Andy, if the notion is folding whatever remains of email core into MailMaint, that might be a simplifying action. But But the underlying problem, at least from my point of view, is there's very little energy left for any of this. And as a consequence, what we're seeing is a small number of people who are making passionate and not necessarily on topic arguments that are discouraging other participation, and we're basically down to chairs and authors and 2 or 3 other people, some of them very loud, participating in this, and very, very little that could be used to justify claims of working group or IETF consensus.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of view this as a management item at the moment. So and I agree, the email core, the enthusiasm in email core has pretty much dried up, and that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking about trying to move this work to MailMate, just to consolidate it. But what that would also do is free up some of the resources to help work on this issue as well. We're still not there yet. I'm still working on this in the background, and we'll have to go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for raising this item on the interim, John. This is what interims are for. So you definitely raised the visibility for it, and hopefully we'll get some energy injected.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. With that, I think we've covered our agenda item. We're a little bit over. Thanks for the folks who stayed. Appreciate all of you, and hopefully we'll see you at IETF Madrid. And if you have any comments on the interim, please send them to the list so that we can gather feedback there.
And also many thanks to Jim for jumping in with the minutes.
Yes, thank you, Jim. All right, bye all. See you online.